and welcome to episode 3 of Outtakes. I am Dr. Elizabeth Plummer, and today I have one of my favorite beverages, rooibos tea from South Africa, because it is a little bit warm. I'm cold day, not warm. It's cold day, this warm beverage.
And hi, I'm Jeff Kuhn, and yeah,
Hi.
here at Ohio University in beautiful Athens, Ohio, we got some snow on the ground, so it's feeling a little wintry, and I'm here for it.
Yes. So if you've missed any of our previous episodes, Jeff and I built a course for the U.S. Department of State English language programs on technology in our language classrooms, incorporating technology in our language classrooms. And these are our outtakes from those sessions, things that didn't make it in to the sessions, changes that have happened since we've recorded the sessions, built the course, because as many of us know, technology changes. So let's go ahead and get started with our first question, which is how can teachers balance integrating technology and protecting privacy? I think this
Yeah,
is really important because I hear a lot of teachers saying, it doesn't really matter. They're going to collect my data. So I don't care about that. I only care about engaging my classroom, engaging my students. And one of the things I say to them is that every little thing that you do to help protect the privacy of you and your students is important. And depending on where you are, the laws may require you to actually protect the privacy of your students and to put those protections in. And so the analogy I make, I love to ride my bicycle. When I ride to a place and I put my bicycle in a bike rack and I'm going to go and do some things, I could just leave my bicycle there and hope that no one's going to steal it. I can put sort of like a small little dinky lock on it that could be easily cut by scissors or by clippers. Or I could put a more robust lock on my bicycle, and that makes it less enticing for someone who's going to steal it because they're going to have to put a lot more effort into trying to get to my bicycle. And so I think about my privacy in that way. I want to make it as difficult as possible for individuals to get access to my information.
right, and that's kind of the best way to think about it. And I think there's that issue too when we think about, well, why, why should I worry about this? And it really is philosophical. Privacy is a right. If you don't exercise your rights, you don't get to keep them. And I think there's that issue. You want to protect your privacy because we have a right to privacy. And a lot of that is based on this idea of what they call contextual integrity. Basically, if you take data out of context and your privacy is being violated, and so you can think about it that way with your students too. There is this idea too of called a man in the middle attack, or even just information where, you know, Elizabeth, you have my information on your phone. You download an app, and the app collects data. Now that company has my data from you. And so think about that as a teacher. It's like if you're in possession of your students' data, how do you protect it? Because it can be taken from you, and they have no say in the matter. And I think it's just a really important thing to think about when we start to deal in data and privacy. And there's this well, yeah, there's this great graphic that you put up on the course where thinking about how you can interact with technology and at the basic on a web page on a computer, just browsing the internet, probably the most anonymous way to interact with something, all the way to the other end, which is to download the app on your phone. And so I often think about that and refer to teachers of, hey, do the students need the app, or could they do it just on a web browser somewhere? And even little things like that, that little thing can make a big difference in how much students' data is being collected, and that's a way that you can kind of help.
Yeah, yeah, think about it. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to our next question, which is, what would you say to a teacher who is not concerned about bias in AI use? Oh, this is something that I hear from teachers, is that, you know, my classroom is neutral. I don't have a lot of culture happening in my classroom, especially if they are teaching in an environment that's very homogenous. And even language teachers teaching in different countries, different contexts, have homogenous classrooms, right? Where all their students come from the culture that they're in. And I think, it doesn't matter because what I'm doing with the AI is not biased, right? I'm having the AI just create lesson plans for me. That's not biased, right? It's
Right.
just creating lesson plans for me. It's writing some text for me. That's not bias. And I think, we talked a lot in the course about the bias in images, and I think the bias in images are easier to see than the bias in other kinds of things we might generate from AI.
Right. And that's where like a behind the scenes to the course, images were the best way to show that in a short amount of time. But that's not to say that only in imagery does bias occur. And I think what didn't make it in the course was there's much more to the way that AI produces information that has some bias that we could be aware of. It just wasn't punchy enough and quick enough to get our idea across in 15 minutes, right?
Yeah, yeah. And these teachers who say, my classroom is neutral, culturally neutral. No classroom is culturally neutral.
Right. It's just
Um,
your culture is being represented, you know.
yeah, yeah. Well, and you may not realize that your students, are trying to fit within your culture because they're adapting to the culture that's in it. So you might say, yeah, no, the students are doing fine. But when you're talking about AI generating things for that classroom, the AI is generating teaching ideas based on the biases that exist in it in terms of what a classroom looks like. And if your classroom doesn't look like that, the things that it's recommending are not going to fit. And if you try to put them in your classroom and you don't recognize, oh my gosh, this is biased based on a classroom that's not like my classroom, it may not work for you and
Right.
your students.
And there was a great example again in the comments that came up where one of the participants had AI create a lesson plan, and then her critique of it was almost like an experienced teacher reviewing the lesson plan of a student teacher, and she was like, from a diversity, accessibility standpoint, this would be an issue. How do you accommodate this and how to accommodate that? She saw these biases in the AI lesson plan that somebody who's starry-eyed about AI maybe just not see. She had this very critical look at it, and it was fantastic to just point out that like it just spit out lesson plan text about grammar, but there were still these biases in there in terms of like the types of students you're teaching, the abilities of the students you're teaching, the languages getting used, something that we could talk about where if you look through the material that's being produced by AI and everyone in the position of power has a him pronoun and assistants have a her pronoun, that's a bias, right? Did you see it or not? And that's why we have to really kind of look through it and just see if it's there.
I think it's hard for teachers who are looking for something to save them time, right? It's so easy. It pulls it out and you're like, oh yeah, here's this text now. I can use this in my classroom and stuff. And I don't blame teachers who want to do that.
Right. But I think one of the things we can also think about with bias too. It's at the fundamental level, these AI softwares are being made by companies that have shareholders or have profits they're trying to get, and so there's a bias already right there. And I think that's the thing of like we talked about with off camera was AI is getting OpenAI just announced that their Chat GPT is better at creative writing, right? And I think there's this marketability towards oh, it can do this and this, all these cool creative things. That's all marketing, right? The bias is to get you hooked to use their product. And as the old adage goes, if a product is free, you're the product, right? And they're just collecting your data. So I think there's a bias right there.
Yeah, Dan, I think that's a great place to end. Thank you for joining us here in session 3, and we'll see you in our next outtakes.